Daroff, CEO, Malcolm Hoenlein, Vice Chair, and myself, we want to welcome you to today's Zoom briefing with Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus, the international spokesperson of the IDF. At the end of the meeting today, we'll have a special presentation in his honor to salute him for 24 years in the IDF and 4 years in the IDF spokesperson unit. So now it's my pleasure to formally introduce Lieutenant Colonel Conricus, who is going to address the escalating violence from Gaza, unrest in Jerusalem, and Israel's security concerns following the postponement of the Palestinian elections. As head of the international media branch of the IDF spokespersons unit, Lieutenant Colonel Conricus is the IDF spokesman to the world. Lieutenant Colonel Conricus is responsible for the public affairs and public diplomacy of the IDF in both traditional and social media, and leads a team of more than 50 highly talented Israeli men and women. Lieutenant Colonel Conricus has served the IDF in various capacities, including combat experience in Lebanon and Gaza, as well as platoon and company commander, while focusing the majority of his military service on international relations and military diplomacy. Our call today is on the record. Please use the hand raise function to ask questions. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Lieutenant Colonel Conricus, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you, Diane. And I want to begin with acknowledging that you surprised me a bit. I wasn't prepared, and mentally speaking, I am so far from really being in the mindset of finishing up. We all know that a month and a half in Israel, that's a time span where you could have a war and a half, maybe 3. Not that I'm hoping for anything, but it's very far from ending, and that's why I am surprised. I'm of course pleasantly surprised, and I really appreciate the gesture. I'd like to thank, of course, you, ma'am, Diane Loeb, as well as Malcolm and William, and all of the distinguished guests and participants who are here for yet another Zoom call. In the military, once we reach a milestone of any kind, we usually either get a pin like this or something smaller, or we issue a t-shirt. So I don't know, maybe you should have the Conference of Presidents t-shirts for 100 Zooms accomplished. I think that's a milestone, and I think you should treat yourself to some kind of award. Zoom fatigue is a serious matter, and I really appreciate that you're here, that you're taking your time, that you want to stay informed. And I do have a few things to share with regards to the security situation. I will be relatively brief for a spokesperson. I'll speak for around 20 minutes, and I'll speak about our current situation, the main trends, and the main things that are in our focus. And then, of course, I'd be more than happy to try to answer questions for the time that we have. And I don't know, William or Ms. Loeb, if you're running the time, I'm at your disposal and have an open schedule after this meeting, so it is your time. Let's begin then. I'll just, you know what? No, I won't need the map for now. What I'll say to begin with is that in a week ago, had we done this meeting, this briefing, then I would have been speaking about a misleading and very sensitive quiet that is prevailing, but then things started to change, and that misleading quiet became not so quiet, quite unstable, and the volatility has risen over the last week and a half, 2 weeks. It started with quite significant rocket fire from Gaza. Around 40 rockets in total were fired in about a period of 2 days, 48 hours towards Israeli cities. Fortunately, no Israeli casualties, no significant damage. By the way, we're commemorating 10 years of operational duty of the Iron Dome, which so far has proven to be extremely successful. And last week's operations were were really similar, and all of the rockets that had a trajectory of landing in Israeli populated areas were successfully intercepted, and the only miscomfort was the fact that Israeli civilians had to run for shelter in the Gaza envelope and Sderot, which is not something that we take lightly, but I'm happy that that's the only thing that was caused Israeli civilians. Since then, the situation with regards to Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank has deteriorated. And what we're looking at now is instability in Jerusalem. Very interesting to see for those of you who follow social media and have an interest in social media and how events on the ground are influenced by social media activities. For those of you who aren't already on TikTok, and maybe some people in the audience aren't yet on TikTok, I guess, Hamas is waging an ongoing effort, mainly on TikTok, but not only, Facebook and other social media as well, in inciting and trying to escalate the situation in Jerusalem using social media, amplifying events in the western part of the city in order to try to destabilize the eastern part, and in order to spread instability in basically all of Judea and Samaria. So they've been doing a concentrated effort on social media. 2 days ago, we saw a dedicated statement by Mohammed Deif, military leader of Hamas in Gaza, openly threatening that there would be consequences, for, as his terminology, if steps were taken in Sheikh Jarrah, one of the neighborhoods in Jerusalem. And we see really a clear, very blatant effort by Hamas to escalate the situation, trying to distance themselves on one hand, but definitely trying to escalate what's going on in Judea and Samaria. We had 2 terror attacks, one which was fortunately a very light attempt, and one which was unfortunately a successful terrorist attack, leading to the death of an Israeli teenager, 19-year-old Israeli civilian, who unfortunately succumbed to his wounds yesterday night. This attack was at the Tapuach junction, a central junction in the central part of Judea and Samaria. And we've been on a manhunt for the last 48 hours. The manhunt ended a few hours ago when the terrorist was apprehended, joint cooperation between the IDF, ISA, Israeli police, and a few other security agencies. As I speak, the situation, I would define it as relatively stable. It's tense, and we are definitely on elevated readiness for any kind of developments in Judea and Samaria or around the Gaza border. We have reinforced, we did that almost a week ago. We reinforced Judea and Samaria with additional infantry troops, Golani, Givati, and a few others, and a few special forces as well, so that we could have a stronger hold on different sensitive areas and to reinforce troops in order to minimize the risk of or the potential of terrorist attacks. We know that once there is a successful terrorist attack, it has really a halo effect, and it really can ignite a wave of terrorist attacks, and that's definitely something that we want to avoid. With regards to Gaza, looking at Gaza, if we put things into historical or a little bit perspective of the past, the last months have been relatively quiet, except for the recent rocket fire, as I spoke about, which came after many months of relative stability. But another milestone which is important and perhaps not so much spoken about, I don't know how many of you in the group had the good fortune of participating in the last big visit, or one of the last big visits of the Conference of Presidents with the IDF. We went down south to see the construction work of the underground wall. I'm sure Malcolm remembers, and many others who participated as well. So that wall, I'm happy to announce, ladies and gentlemen, has been completed, is fully operational. It's a 45-mile long underground concrete sensory barrier. Why all of the words? Well, they actually have importance, and concrete because it's made of concrete, and sensory barrier because it's full with sensors that are aimed to identify any attempt by Hamas or others to dig tunnels towards the barrier itself, and to locate those tunnels before they even reach the wall itself. So far, it has proven itself, and it has already helped us intercept 2 tunnels that were dug from the Palestinian side towards Israel. Those tunnels crossed the border, under the border, and approached, but fortunately were intercepted, were identified, and we were able to intercept them. So it's not entirely clear if our enemies on the other side, Hamas and Islamic Jihad, have understood the shift in the paradigm and the fact that the situation now is different, and that we have this new layer of defense. But our modus operandi is that we have a new layer of defense, but still are very aware and cautious, understanding that these terrorist organizations are still putting a lot of effort in trying to tunnel under the border in order to attack Israeli civilians. An important part from a psychological and media point of view is, of course, that Israeli communities feel much safer. Israeli civilians know that they are safer around along the Gaza border with regards to tunnel. Unfortunately, still rockets are fired. As I said before, we understood that Hamas allowed the fire from the Gaza Strip, wasn't necessarily directly involved and wasn't firing it itself, but that Hamas allowed the fire, and luckily for them, decided to stop it just as we signaled to them that they had crossed the red line and that we weren't going to tolerate any rocket fire towards our civilians. So to summarize the situation, before I get on to a big event which is upcoming in the next month in the IDF, we're relatively stable, but things can change as we speak with regards to Gaza. We are deployed along the border as before, are enjoying the new layers of defense, and are assessing the situation with regards to Hamas. When we spoke about the topics of our conversation, I wasn't requested to speak so much about the North, but for those of you who follow news, then I'm sure that you've read and seen reports in international media about activities that are attributed to Israel. So there are definitely things that are going on, and things related to Iran, and regional events that are ongoing, which, since we're doing the briefing on this line, we'll have to leave with those remarks only. Next month, or next week actually, we're starting a month-long exercise, which is called the Chariots of Fire, in Hebrew, Merkavot Ha'esh, Chariots of Fire, which is a first of its kind, ordered by the Chief of the General Staff, Lieutenant General Aviv Kochavi, whereby we will be training, simulating scenarios from complete quiet and routine security, all the way up to full-scale war and maneuver in enemy terrain, and everything in between. And we're talking about more than one active front of fighting, massive rocket fire towards the Israeli civilian rear, as well as an opportunity for the IDF to test and evaluate new techniques and new concepts of how to conduct operations on various fronts simultaneously, how to effectively use intelligence and incorporate it into the battlefield, the new role of cyber in support of ground maneuver and operations, kinetic operations on the ground. Those events and other things are the things that we will be focusing on during the war month. And it's something that we are preparing for, which will start next week and go on for the next 4 weeks. Those are I'd say the main points. To summarize, it is a very tense weekend is upcoming. It'll be the last week or the last weekend of Ramadan. There's a Muslim holiday called Laylat al-Qadr, and next week we'll have Eid al-Fitr, which are the big 3-day holiday, which is the big 3-day holiday, which marks the end of Ramadan. So that's also a potential flashpoint. Of course, as we spoke, and as you said in the introduction, all of the political events related to the Palestinian decision to postpone elections, and Shavuot, which is a week after that, and Jerusalem Day, both the ones that the Iranians made up and the ones that we celebrate, are all coinciding in a very short period of time, which makes for quite a volatile mix of events. Our aim, together with the other security organizations, Israeli police, the ISA, Shabak, and other organizations, is try to stabilize the situation, avoid confrontations, and make sure that we don't escalate into anything that neither of us are interested in at this stage. With that, I think is a broad enough opening, and if it's all right with you, William and Diane, I'd be more than happy to try to answer questions.
Great, thank you very much. And I'll just remind everyone to use the hand raise function to ask a question. And I'll go ahead and get started. You know, Israel's expecting a real increase in tourism in the next few months. Many people who have been wanting to come for a long time and very excited to come as borders are opening somewhat. How will that impact the IDF's efforts to maintain calm in Jerusalem and keep the situations in the West Bank and Gaza from escalating?
Yeah, so thank you for that. You know, last week we commemorated, I think, a big milestone and a happy event. For the first time in a year and I think 3 months, there were 0 IDF soldiers who are identified as carrying COVID-19. 0, none, which is really a milestone. Just a year and a few months ago, I remember when we had more than 20,000 soldiers in quarantine and 1,500 that were actually sick or were positive. And that, of course, had somewhat of an impact. And that is, of course, in direct relation to Israeli society. Today, I'm happy to say that the situation is totally different. The IDF, thanks to the vaccines, is totally without COVID-19 for the time being, and I hope that remains the situation. And Israel is, as you said very correctly, beginning to look at really reaping the benefits of our successful vaccination campaign, which also, by the way, the IDF was part of. Regarding the question, our aim and the directives given by the Security Cabinet and the government is to maintain stability. I can't go into details, but I can tell you that there were numerous events over the last weeks where there were different options for the IDF to deal with different situations on various borders, not only Gaza and in the south. And the information I have access to is that in all those different bottlenecks, or all of those different areas where a decision was to be made, the option that was taken was the option that would most likely lead to limiting the escalation and to calm down the situation. So that, at the end of the day, is what we're trying to do. It is quite a challenging task because there are many factors that are trying to influence and destabilize the situation. I spoke about Hamas, but they're not the only ones. And since it's sensitive religious times, that creates a different dynamic and atmosphere. And together with the other security organizations, we are trying to calm the situation down and to maintain stability. I can say that we're less thinking about tourism. That's less, on the top of our mind, but basically to avoid confrontation and to avoid an escalation which we know is possibly just below the level of the water, just below the surface. And we know that it won't take much, maybe a successful terrorist attack or two, maybe inadvertent results, casualties on the Palestinian side. Many things could serve as triggers, and we definitely want to avoid that.
Sorry about that. I had muted myself so there wasn't any interference. Rachel, next question, please.
Next question is from Bob Sugarman, past chairman of the Conference of Presidents.
Let me try to unmute me. I think I have. Colonel, first, let me join in the expression of appreciation for your briefings, whether in person in the old days or by Zoom today. Whoever your successor is going to be, he or she will have big shoes to fill. I'm interested in, to the extent you can talk about it, the situation in Syria vis-a-vis Iran's ongoing attempt to establish the road from Tehran to the Mediterranean. We read from time to time about IDF efforts in that regard. Could you give us an overview and a summary of where that whole situation stands?
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your kind words, and it's much appreciated. About Iranian entrenchment in Syria and Iranian malign activity around our borders. Unfortunately, despite the difficulties that they face, the Iranians, what we see is that they continue to allocate significant resources in terms of personnel, funding, time, energy, intelligence, and also political capital. They focus a lot of those assets in their continued quest to entrench themselves militarily in Syria and to establish offensive capabilities within striking range of Israel. That still remains their strategy. It still remains their aim. They have suffered significant setbacks over the last years, some of them related to Israeli activity, but not all of them, Israeli kinetic activity and other types of activity. But at the end of the day, since you see that, according to foreign reports, counter activity continues, then of course you can deduce from that that Iranian activity continues and that they're still enjoying the full support and hospitality of the Syrian regime, and that they are still embedding themselves in Iran. I wouldn't be able to say at this stage, and I'm sure that it is of interest, if they are more boldened or less bold in their activity, their military, their malign activity in Syria since negotiations started in Vienna. Our intel, they're still a bit undecided about it, but we definitely see continued efforts by the Iranians, despite the fact that they have had setbacks in personnel and equipment, and despite the fact that we also assess that they know that in terms of, I'll use a hardcore military term, which we use, that in terms of intelligence, they're penetrated. They basically know that a lot, if not all of their activity is visible to various parties, various of their enemies. And despite all that, they continue. I think that what also has not changed is Israeli resolve, whether political or military, to continue to actively negate this threat, because we see it as a strategic long-term threat towards our security. And we've said and acted according to those statements that we're not going to allow it. But to summarize, it seems as if events maybe as if the river is narrowing, and thus the stream flows quicker and faster, obviously in relation to political events, global events, and changes of late. And it definitely can be very interesting in the future.
Thank you very much. Rachel, next question, please.
Next question is from Mindy Stein of Emuna.
We thank you also for your service to us and to Eretz Yisrael. We will miss you greatly. You know, we all talk about the worrisome part of Iran's nuclear weapons, but there's such a worrisome part about their conventional weapons, about the PGMs and their suicide drone capabilities. And like he said, the Shia Crescent and the mobilization of sectarian and proxy forces. Just wondering, I know you can't tell us what's in the arsenal of the IDF, but we want some reassurance that the PGMs, that there's something being done that can counter the PGMs.
Let me tell you then, thank you also, Mindy, for your kind words. Let's connect that to the upcoming exercise, Chariots of Fire. I can tell you that it's very much based on reality and on intelligence as we understand it. And it's based on enemy capabilities as we understand them, enemy capabilities and intentions. And what we're going to simulate over the next weeks is directly anchored in intelligence as we understand it. So we're going to simulate massive rocket fire towards Israel, and we're going to simulate how the IDF intends to deal with that rocket fire. And here, to give you kind of a general direction, again, using the words of the Chief of the General Staff, we're very clear about the fact that it's an extremely unfortunate, horrible situation where Hezbollah has embedded its military infrastructure inside the civilian areas. And maybe before there was some, other types of a dilemma or different policies, but what our Chief of Staff has said numerous times and very clearly is that wherever we will be fired upon, we will target those places, those legitimate military targets. We will target them with our precise and lethal capabilities. And yes, I can assure you that we have the defense systems to intercept against various types of munitions that Hezbollah has. But unfortunately, and this is also shouldn't serve as news, the amount of rockets in Hezbollah's arsenal will be a challenge. And we understand that there will be rockets exploding in Israel. That is the unfortunate understanding. And that's why we know, the IDF knows, that we have to start taking out rocket launchers and the supply system of those rockets as quickly as possible, because otherwise Israeli civilian lives are at risk. So it's going to be an interesting month ahead. And hopefully at the end of this month, we will have new lessons or directions for lessons identified so that we can improve our defenses, improve our lethality, improve our capabilities to connect between different sensors and different parts of the IDF, ground sensors, aerial sensors, and then offensive capabilities, whether it's the Air Force or ground fires, and many other things. And hopefully at the end of the month, we will be even better than we are now.
Thank you very much. Raphael, next question, please.
Next question is from Betty Ehrenberg of the World Jewish Congress.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Colonel. Also, thank you so much for everything you've done, and we hope to continue to see you anyway in many other occasions and to hear from you. You know that we took the position, a very strong position, that and helped pass the legislation called the Taylor Force Act, which we hoped would eliminate payments being made to Palestinian terrorists and their families as a reward for attacking and murdering Israelis. I'm asking now about this case about Yehuda Guetta, the 19-year-old student that was murdered just the other night. It's very painful for us in Galut also to share what you're feeling in Israel about this. From what we understood from reports, the terrorist has been apprehended, but his family was helping him as well and aiding him. he has not been identified as belonging to any one group. Does this mean that he will, what does this mean for the chances of he and his family being rewarded for this crime? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you as well for your kind words. It is of course very sad, extremely sad that a 19-year-old boy, a young man, is shot and killed by a terrorist while on his way home from studies. There's no reason for that, and it's a horrible crime. And I'm happy that the perpetrator, he is still considered suspect, but I have very high faith and trust in ISA intelligence. So I'll call him the perpetrator or the terrorist, that he has been apprehended and he will be brought to justice. We understand, based on the intelligence that we have, that he had support, not in planning the attack, but and not in executing the attack, but in after the attack. And the people who were involved in that, they're known to the Israeli security agencies. And I think that there's a very clear track record of anybody who is aiding and abetting terrorist activities. He faces the long arms of Israeli security organizations and is eventually brought to justice for his activities. And I'm sure that this will happen in this case as well. As to the whole Palestinian policy of rewarding terrorists with their public money or their international aid, that is of course very, very regrettable. We see a clear line between that policy and the motivation of future terrorists to engage in terrorist activity, whether it is direct attacks or in auxiliary roles. And that is also why the IDF, of course, has been so clear about the fact that this policy, this internal Palestinian policy, is something that should stop. And that's why Israeli government policy has been to withhold the tax money that is collected on behalf of the Palestinian Authority. But challenging situation ahead. Of course, the international political situation is a bit different. And I think that the Palestinians are testing waters and trying to see what they can get away with in terms of internal policies and in support of terrorism. Hopefully they'll make better decisions about where they spend their money, and we could hope that they spend it on education, infrastructure, economy, healthcare, and not on providing for terrorists.
Thank you. Rachel, next question, please.
Question is from Mort Klein of the ZOA.
Hi, thank you. First of all, people should know that the Taylor Force Act, before it was passed, was watered down, that they only lose a portion of the funding from America. My question is, can you tell us that when General Austin, the Secretary of Defense in America, came to visit with the Israeli officials with the IDF, did he understand well the military challenges, terrorist challenges that Israel has, and did he seem sympathetic to those challenges and sympathetic to the needs of the IDF when General Austin came to visit with you?
Thank you for that. I wasn't part of the meetings, but according to the information that I have, first of all, let's look at the background of the general or the secretary. He definitely has a very clear understanding of the security threats that Israel faces, from the low-level local challenges to the big picture strategic ones, including nuclear Iran, regional Iranian activities, and anything all the way down to local wannabe terrorist attacks in Judea and Samaria. That's clear. Second thing I'd like to say, not directly related to Department of Defense, but really speaking at the military level, we are in a very good situation where our military cooperation between the IDF and the Israeli defense establishment and our American counterparts continues. It is very solid, it is intimate, it spans across force design and force deployment. That is, we build military defenses and military capabilities together, and we share intelligence, and we operate together or share operations, and a few other things. And those things continue as we speak, and they are going strong. And on a military level, we are very satisfied with the level of trust, intimacy, and joint operations that we have. Absolutely crucial for the state of Israel, and I think, and I know according to American assessments, very beneficial for American security interests as well. I don't know, as opposed to the general inclination or attitude with regards to the information, and I wouldn't want to venture any guess, but I know that from meetings that senior military officials had with the secretary, very clear, very precise, very focused, very clear and professional understanding of the threats and of our security needs, and in his words, an ironclad commitment to Israeli security. So I think that answers the question, sir.
Thank you very much. Next question, please, Rachel.
Next question is from Michael Brenner of the AJC.
Hi, thanks for your service and thanks for doing this. So I had a question about, I know last week that Israel shot down a Hezbollah drone, and it seems like it wasn't the first one that violated Israeli airspace. I know also that there had been an issue in recent months with Hezbollah shooting at unmanned aircraft vehicles and so on and so forth. What's your assessment of Hezbollah's seems to be a growing and sophisticated military capability? Is it an issue that you're working on, and how are you responding to it?
Hezbollah definitely has, well, first of all, Hezbollah is a very serious, what we call terror army. In terms of terminology, we look at Hezbollah and Hamas and a few others, not only as terrorist organizations, because we think that kind of belittles their military capabilities. When we look at Hezbollah, what we see in front of us is an organization that has changed from being just a terrorist or guerrilla organization to something that in many parts now also resembles a terror army. Army in the sense of structure, chain of command, logistics, budget, support, etc., etc., and also R&D and future concepts and development of the combat capabilities, much like regular militaries do. So Hezbollah, they were pioneers in the use of in the effective use of IEDs in southern Lebanon. They were extremely professional with the deployment of rockets and mortars, also in southern Lebanon. I have personal experience from it. And we know that they have gained significant lessons learned and combat knowledge and experience from fighting in Syria, alongside Syrian, Russian, and Iranian units against other Muslims in Syria. And they've gained quite a lot of capabilities and insights, and that they are experimenting with new or newer capabilities and how to deploy them effectively on the battlefield. UAVs, drones, and remotely piloted aircraft are one such capability, which we know that Hezbollah is trying to develop and to advance. We're monitoring them, and the fact that we shot down 2 of their UAVs in a span of a week should be a clear indicator of our ability to understand, assess, and eventually defend ourselves against those targets. But we work under the working assumption that Hezbollah, if they would want to stage a surprise attack using drones, IEDs, rockets, anti-tank missiles, perhaps snipers, they would have the ability to conduct one successful attack, maybe even more. But what we also know is that Hezbollah, despite having significant capabilities at their hand, 130,000 rockets aimed at Israeli civilians in cities. And as we spoke about before, and as one of the questions related to, precision-guided missiles that are being developed, built, and manufactured in Lebanon. We know that they have these capabilities, but we also know that they know very clearly that there is a clear red price tag on any attack, a price to be paid for any attack against Israel. And we assess that they're very careful and that they operate and carry themselves accordingly, knowing that they might be able to put off an attack, but that we will respond fiercely. Our chief of staff has said so very clearly, and that's the general level of readiness, and that's the resolve. And I think they see that and understand it and act accordingly. But just a last word, they're experimenting with a lot of things. UAVs is one of them. They experimented and put a lot of efforts in tunneling under our border for many years, investing dozens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars in the tunnel project. They dug 6 tunnels under our border. We exposed and destroyed all of them. So it's an ongoing battle. Some of it is kinetic, some of it is intelligence oriented. And I can assure you that that our personnel along the northern border aren't resting and waiting for something to surprise them.
Thank you. Rachel, next question, please.
Next question is from Fred Zeidman of the Council for Secure America.
Fred, you're on mute. Yeah, you're still on mute.
How about now?
There you go.
Okay, great. For those of us who are chomping at the bit to get back to Israel, we're obviously expecting a massive wave of tourists over the next few months as the borders open up. Please, God. How will this impact the IDF's efforts to maintain calm in Jerusalem and to keep the situation in the West Bank and Gaza from escalating?
I think he actually already broadly answered that, Fred. So unless you have anything you want to add, Lieutenant Colonel Conricus, do you have anything you want to add to that?
I'll just reiterate that that is our goal, to maintain stability, to promote stability, to do so while defending our civilians and making sure that none of our enemies develop any strategic capabilities against us. We're aware of the sensitivities and operating accordingly.
Okay. I think with that, I'm going to turn it over to Malcolm. Malcolm, are you there?
I am here and unmuted. So first of all, I want to add my words of thanks to the Colonel. He really has been an exemplary spokesperson, a representative of Israel, and more than just his improving English, which has really become quite remarkable, better than most of ours now, that he always was available to us. It's not just in the many Zooms that he's done and appearances at the conference, but when the extraordinary things that he does day to day in his office does, the people who work for him all know how important this relationship is. And when we had the President's Conference missions to arrange those spectacular and very special visits to the tunnels in the north, to the fence, to the wall in Gaza, which we were the first group to see the F-35, so many things over the years. It's hard to even list them all, but I just want to tell you that it's never taken for granted. And God willing, you'll have great successes to come, and that you'll keep the relationship with us and visit us when you come to the States and your future endeavors. If I can, I just want to ask you 2 quick things, or not quick, but one about the war at sea, what's happening off the coast of, with the Russians now seeming to protect Iranian shipments that they can't do by land, are now doing by sea, and the extension perhaps in the Gulf. And second, that Hamas is the reports of intifada efforts in the West Bank, the Hamas increasing activity. Is there cooperation from the Palestinian security forces? Do they maintain the relationship of the past?
Malcolm, dear Malcolm, well, your questions are always the best ones, I must say. You never fail to bring forward the best questions. And let me say just before, it's an important point regarding our long-standing relationship between the IDF, the spokesperson unit, and the Conference of Presidents. Together with me behind the scenes is Major Liad, who is head of the public diplomacy section, together with two of his soldiers. The other ones doing him and his soldiers are the ones facilitating and bringing everything into reality. And I can assure you that under his guidance and under the guidance of my successor, the great relationship we have will continue for the mutual benefit of us all and for Am Yisrael. Having said that, and again, thank you for all you said, Malcolm. Regarding the question, definitely the situation at sea or at the seas, because it's more than one, is very interesting. I think the Iranians for a long period of time have gotten away with evading international sanctions and basically trading oil for money in order to support illicit activities, terrorist activities, whether it's the Revolutionary Guards or Hezbollah or other terrorist proxies that they're supporting. And for quite a long time, they've been getting away with it. It seems as if the situation is a bit different now, and maybe Iranian operations are facing setbacks. And it appears that they have to change their operations in order to overcome those setbacks. And it's a very interesting period. I can say that our eyes, in terms of Israeli intelligence as well as combat capabilities, are focused on various seas and various activities that are happening close to Israel, but also far away. And according to many reports, Israel has the capabilities to act when it chooses to intercept various threats. Happy to reiterate now a good opportunity to speak about the force buildup and force capabilities, generation capabilities in the Navy. We just took possession of our second SAR 6 corvette or missile boat delivered from Kiel in northern Germany, now in the hands of the Israeli Navy. Will soon make its maiden voyage from the Baltic Sea back to its home port in Haifa. It will be fitted with the most advanced Israeli weapon systems, cutting edge weapon systems in Israel, and it will become a formidable capability at sea, basically a massive weapon system designed from the blueprint to final stages, together with the German manufacturers, and as I said, fitted with lots of Israeli capabilities. Yes, events at sea are definitely interesting, and I think that we'll see additional news coming out of that sector. We are enhancing capabilities. We're also cooperating with various navies and other militaries in the eastern part of the Mediterranean. I know that you, Malcolm, was personally involved in the Eastern Med, and many of the people who are listening on the conversation were part of conversations in the Eastern Med. Those are very important, and we see the military dividends of those international negotiations really tangible today. With regards to security cooperation, very sensitive topic. The Palestinian Authority and their security organizations are under a lot of internal criticism with regards to their activity and the cooperation. But bottom line should be said that we enjoy good security cooperation and coordination between us and the Palestinian counterparts. It's not without friction and it's not perfect, but it's something that both sides, us and the Palestinian security organizations, understand as absolutely crucial for stability. And the last half year, when the coordination was cut by the Palestinians, I think served as a very good reminder for the Palestinians how important that coordination is. But to answer the question, yes, there is coordination and it is important.
Thank you.
Sorry, you're muted again, Diane.
I'm sorry, I'm mute because I'm worried about background noise. I apologize. I'll now turn to our CEO, William Daroff, for some final comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Diane and Jonathan. It is a pleasure to have you with us again, and thank you so much for joining us. I join in saluting you for your decades of dedicated service to the cause of defending the Jewish state and the Jewish people. For the past 24 years, you've distinguished yourself in the Israel Defense Forces and risen to the role of international spokesperson representing the IDF on the world stage. After fighting for Israel on the physical background, you took the fight to the digital front lines. Throughout your illustrious tenure as international spokesperson, you have capably led the IDF's public diplomacy efforts, meeting with foreign dignitaries and keeping the international community well informed across many different platforms. You have, as we just discussed with Malcolm and Diane at the beginning, been a very close friend of the conference, addressing our leadership missions over the years and briefing us on all manners of security issues. And indeed, you're also become a close friend of mine, which I appreciate greatly. As you begin your next chapter, know that your service will always be greatly appreciated and your presence will be dearly missed. May you go from strength to strength. And now if Rahel will share screen, I want to share a presentation that we will make virtually with you now, but hopefully in a few weeks, I'll be able to give you personally when I see you. This is a print of an original painting by Jerusalem artist Sharon Binder, illustrating the central place of honor for those who protect Jerusalem and the land of Israel. A contemporary drawing of the walls of Jerusalem is encircled by the words, "Set watchmen over your city all day and night," which is included in the Passover Haggadah song, "And it came to pass at midnight." The words are derived from the verse in Isaiah 62:6, "I have set watchmen upon your walls, O Jerusalem, all day and all night," which requests divine protection for the holy city and the entire land of Israel, and by extension asks his people to be eternal guardians of Yerushalayim. So as our eternal guardian, we thank you for your service to our people, to the eternal homeland of the Jewish people, and we look forward to watching your next chapter as you go from strength to strength. So thank you so much, Jonathan, for all of your service to our people and to our land.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm moved. I'm humbled, and it's a magnificent gesture, and I really appreciate it. Toda rabah. I didn't expect it. I don't think that I'm worthy of it. I'm doing my job, and I'm just very fortunate to have had the opportunity to do this specific job that I'm doing. And I'm very happy that we had and we still have this great relationship. And let's just hope that it is the last time we talk, because if we'll talk again, it means that the situation changed and we didn't meet the aim of maintaining stability. That is an option. All jokes aside, it is an option. I hope it doesn't happen, but I hope this will be the farewell from the conference. And of course, I look forward to seeing all of you bimhera b'yameinu in Israel, again to host you along in our beautiful country, to see the borders, to hear about the challenges, but most importantly, to meet the great men and women serving in the IDF who keep this amazing country safe. So thank you very much. Shalom. And I wish you all the best. Toda.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.